long-term supporter of knowledge graphs and fair data, and this conference in particular. So I'm excited to have Carl give us a brief look at what they've been up to.
Great, thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone. This is what's commonly referred to as the graveyard shift in public speaking just after lunch, and especially on a beautiful day like today, I don't blame people maybe just for getting that last bit of sunshine before heading back in for the afternoon. But in all seriousness, thank you very much to Lena and Tom and the rest of the team at HCLS and the Knowledge Graph Conference for inviting ONTOFORCE to present this afternoon at the event at Cornell Technology. Before I get into our presentation today, which is looking at how knowledge graphs are transforming clinical development, I'd like to shortly introduce you to ONTOFORCE. So ONTOFORCE, our mission is to enable life sciences companies to unlock hidden insights from data. And by championing the power of data, we help life sciences companies accelerate drug development to improve patient outcomes. A little bit about the story of ONTOFORCE. So the company was founded in 2011 by Professor Hans Constant. Hans was a data scientist at Eli Lilly. And prior to founding ONTOFORCE, the story of how ONTOFORCE and DISQOVER came into being was that, unfortunately, one of Hans's children was diagnosed with a rare condition for which there wasn't a huge amount of information known about that particular rare disease. And what he wanted to do as a data scientist was to try and piece together all information that was known about that particular condition. But he actually found that that was an incredibly difficult thing to do. And that was really where the idea for ONTOFORCE and our DISQOVER platform first came into being. And today, over 10 years later, as a company, we're headquartered in Ghent, in Belgium, but we also have an operational presence here in the US, in Boston. We have 10,000 users on our DISQOVER platform as of today. And we work exclusively in the biopharmaceutical industry with pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology, and also research institutes and academia. Now, I'm sure that most people are familiar with some of the numbers on this slide as it relates to the cost of drug development and the length of time it takes to approve a new molecular entity. As an industry, we're still concerned by the very high failure rates. So from phase 1 to regulatory approval, there's still a 90% failure rate for NMEs. And I think the way that we look at this today with companies that we work with and the challenge that they're trying to address is that how do they make better decisions earlier in the process downstream on go-no-go decisions on certain compounds to ultimately get more effective medicines to patients. And the consensus is with the companies that we're engaged with is that if they can make the right decision earlier in the drug development process and the drug screening process, the ripple effect that creates upstream is a reduction in cost, risk, and ultimately getting medicines to patients faster. So where do we see this playing out effectively at the moment? Precision medicine, absolutely. So, and the development of new drugs for targeted patient populations. Last year in 2022, there were 35 new molecular entities that were approved by the FDA, and a third of these approvals were for drugs that were classified as personalized medicines. And the majority of these approvals that you can see were in the areas of oncology and rare diseases. And this is, say, pretty consistent across the last 5 years. But what's quite interesting is that there were actually 22 approvals for there were 22 approvals for personalized medicine indication of existing drugs and combinations in 22. And these drugs really redefine intended populations and provide patients with more effective treatments. And why is this happening? Unfortunately, in areas like oncology and immuno-oncology, often patients will become resistant to therapy. And this is driving a need within pharma and biotech who are focused on personalized medicine to identify patients with certain genetic characterizations and attempt to predict combinations to target certain patient subgroups. So how can precision medicine be achieved? I mean, one of the ways that we see is to utilize omics data, which has grown exponentially in recent years. I think everyone's well aware of the growth and increase in data, and omics data is one of the fastest growing areas within life sciences data at the moment. And one of the other drivers is the recent technological developments, reduction of associated costs, computational methods and data and analytics in omics data. And by leveraging the power of omics data, life sciences companies can significantly reduce the cost of drug development and increase the chance of success in bringing new and effective drugs to market. However, there are quite a number of key challenges that are associated with leveraging omics data. So we recently hosted a webinar with our partners at ZS and the Antomics team, and we conducted an audience poll. And some of the main challenges that came out in terms of leveraging omics data were things like integration, management of data, and also standardization. Now, these are just the challenges that we see with omics data, but for those companies that are looking to follow precision medicine strategy, there is an urgent need to map heterogeneous data sets, which are siloed across their organization. And life sciences organizations must connect the dots between these disparate entities to drive meaningful insights from their data. And at ONTOFORCE, we see 5 common challenges within pharmaceutical organizations to achieving this. So the first is barriers to data accessibility for secondary analysis, so that we see that data and metadata that is collected across clinical studies are often stored in separate systems and not exposed to scientists, despite the possibility of being able to utilize that data for secondary analysis. There are also challenges in classifying biological data sets. So we recently hosted a really interesting webinar with James Longdon from eTherapeutics, who are a biotechnology company based in Oxford. The webinar's on our website. I think it's a really great one to watch. And James, in a very kind of deadpan British way, said that naming conventions in biology are a complete mess at the moment, which, you know, from our side resonated a lot. We also see big challenges in harmonizing, as I mentioned before, heterogeneous data sets. So if you look at things like imaging data, assay data, biomarker data, data that's collected along the study is often stored in different formats and not harmonized. And there's also the fourth point is around the limitations of data exploration for scientists and clinicians in conventional data storage tools like clinical trial management systems and data catalogs. And finally, as was mentioned in the last presentation by ZS, it's a big one. 80% of research data that scientists encounter at the moment is unstructured data, which makes it very hard to interpret and analyze. So I spent about 5 minutes talking about challenges. Hopefully I can now present a solution to some of those challenges. And what I would like to do now is just to introduce our platform, which is called DISQOVER. So DISQOVER is a life sciences knowledge platform, which integrates our customers' internal data alongside third-party license data and 140 public data sources that we pre-ingest into the platform. And the DISQOVER tool also has an integrated and harmonized knowledge graph, which facilitates exploration for the end user of interconnected data. And on top of this sits an intuitive user interface that enables your clinician, your research scientist, or your business user to be able to easily explore, visualize, and analyze data. So John talked this morning a lot about the FAIR principles of making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and really the foundations of the architecture for DISQOVER are built upon the FAIR principles. I'll be just briefly jumping into a short demonstration, but here you can see you can integrate internal data sources like electronic lab notebook, clinical trial management systems, target repositories, alongside those 140 pre-ingested public data sources from things like PubMed, clinicaltrials.gov, WHO. We also have a number of the standard ontologies that we bring into the platform, like ICD-10, ICD-9, SNOMED, and MESH. And there's also the ability to include third-party license data via API. I'll now just provide a little bit more depth on our knowledge graph. It's a proprietary knowledge graph which is developed by ONTOFORCE, and what we feel is novel about our graph is that every node on the graph has a separate, unique URI. And what we do is that we map those URIs together if they're relating to the same concept. So, for example, if dasatinib has different URIs, we will map these together in our platform. And through all of that, we'll retain the provenance of where the data source is coming from. So hopefully, using the power of technology, I can very quickly just jump into the platform. Great, looks like that's worked okay. Just gonna make that a little bit bigger. So the first thing just to show is that within the data section here, you have the 140 public data sources that I mentioned that we already pre-ingest into the platform. And you can also see here a visual representation of our knowledge graph within the platform. So for example, if you were to start with a gene or a target, you can see the different contributing data sources for the target information, so things like NCBI gene, open targets. And then you can also see how, when you start with something like a gene, you can also link to things like pathways, proteins, organisms, or also publications. So I'll use one of the examples that I mentioned earlier, which is dasatinib. I don't know. Sorry. Always goes wrong when you try and do these things on the fly. Yeah, no. Okay, great. It's finally got that. So within the platform, you can simply search for a drug or a target that I've just tried to do there. So one of the things that you can see here, as I mentioned, with the pre-ingested ontologies that we have in the platform, you will then be able to see the different synonyms that are associated with Cimzia, and you can then see the ability to capture all of that information within that specific search. That means that you're not missing anything. And then when I come into the drug in the platform, there's just a few things that I wanted to just highlight in this section here. So you see the contributing data sources that you have that are attached to the drug that you can, this will enable you to see when you actually go into the drug record. I mentioned earlier about the original provenance of the data source. You can see within the text of the drug description, you'll be able to see where did that source information specifically come from. And then you can also see the ability of the graph gives you then to start your search with a drug as an example, and then move into different data concepts. So, for example, if you're interested in looking at clinical studies or publications, it gives you the ability to search through that within the platform. Okay, so that was just a short overview of the platform. I think one expression I always use is that the proof is in the pudding. So I want to share with you just a quick case study on a clinical insights use case that we're working on with a large pharmaceutical company. Unfortunately, we missed the deadline on the approval to use their name in the presentation today. So I've had to anonymize this. Because we didn't yet have the consent, unfortunately. But I can assure you this is a live project that we're working on at the moment. So the idea with this project, or the vision, I should say, is that really what this company wanted to have was every scientist to have access to the right data at their fingertips, and really to be able to leverage the rich clinical trial data to ask complex questions and to generate new insights. And the challenges that this company faced, as we discussed earlier, were things like findability and accessibility of data. Accessibility because a lot of data was locked with project teams and vendors, and there were also data completeness and quality issues due to where information had historically been stored. Today we have more than 2,000 studies with this particular customer that are searchable within the DISQOVER platform for measures relating to clinical data in combination with imaging and omics data, which allows scientists to easily explore data and to ask complex questions. So what's the benefits that we've been able to deliver is that data can be found in seconds, and complex questions that were previously unattempted because they would take 6 months to get the answer to can now be done in 30 minutes using the platform. And using the knowledge graph, they can also explore results cross-study, which enable them to build virtual cohorts and also to identify and validate new biomarkers. Similarly to what I just showed in the DISQOVER platform a moment ago, here you can see the landing page with the different canonical data sets. You can see quite a large number of different data sets. You have analytical data, assay data, biomarker data. So really tackling that challenge of, how do we integrate and harmonize heterogeneous data sets. And I would also add that this UI is fully customizable dependent on how a customer wants to design the search and user interface for their customers. And you can also see a visual representation of the knowledge graph that this customer uses on the DISQOVER platform. So in closing now, I'll just talk a little bit about how we deliver DISQOVER to different customers that we work with. So the DISQOVER suite focuses across the entire drug development cycle on 4 different value areas. So early research and development, clinical, regulatory, and cross-functional intelligence. And within those 9 value areas, there are 9 different applications, which you can see here on the screen. Within these application areas are different use cases. So a use case is a different combination of public and private data expressed through a specific dashboard or visualization relevant to the context of an application. And what I'll do now is I'll just look into one of the proposition areas in a little bit more detail, which was DISQOVER for Clinical, which was very similar to what I just talked about in the case study. So within DISQOVER for Clinical, we focus on 2 areas, which is clinical trial design and clinical insights. And the clinical insights solution is an out-of-the-box product where you can connect your internal clinical omics, imaging, and biomarker data alongside the public data sources that we bring into the DISQOVER platform. And this can really help our customers to investigate their biomarker strategy, explore new hypotheses on cohort selection, inclusion-exclusion criteria, and identify relationships across study to find new insights. Why would I say that? Why are we delivering the product this way? And I think this is something that we've changed quite considerably in the last 12 months. I think a few years ago with the technology, we would go to a customer and say, what's your use case? What data do you want to bring into the platform? The question that we often get back now is, well, you guys have been working in this industry for 10 years. You tell us where's the value in your product for our organization? I think John talked earlier about what are the use cases that can deliver tangible business impact. Where are the wins? And I think over the years of working with different companies, these are the reason that we've now come to these different propositions is because that we are aware that these are the propositions that deliver value for the customers that we're working with. And they're also, importantly, it's something where you can measure the impact of the integration of these types of services. So if the question comes back, well, why invest in a knowledge graph project? Why invest in a technology like this? It's something that can really deliver tangible outcomes to the drug development process for its customers. So in summary, we we spoke at the very beginning about the need for pharma and biotechnology companies to be able to make better decisions downstream earlier in the drug development process to mitigate the risks of failure, and also increase the speed of development and ultimately get drugs to market quicker for patients. And we believe with our DISQOVER for Clinical solution that we can help pharmaceutical companies to increase clinical research success, optimize their portfolio efficiency, accelerate clinical development, and also be more risk conscious and mitigate risks in their clinical trial planning. Finally, although this will only be formally announced at the BioIT event in Boston next week, you will get a sneak peek into our new product launch of DISQOVER with enhanced natural language processing. So DISQOVER NLP technology will allow you to quickly find and analyze information about specific biological entities such as diseases, genes, proteins, and more, populations, interventions, and outcomes that are mentioned in large volumes of unstructured text data. So if I think back to the challenges slide that I showed before, it's how can we help that challenge of naming conventions in biological entities, and deal with that challenge of also 80% of research data that's unstructured. And what you'll get with our NLP solution, it's pre-processed enhanced public data. So if you think back to the public data sources that I showed from PubMed and clinicaltrials.gov, it's pre-processed public data out of the box. We also have the possibility to process private data with out-of-the-box annotators that have been developed. And really, we see this as a one-stop shop for one single solution for structured data and also unstructured data. So if you'd like some more information on this, Morgan, who is our business development representative for the US, has some flyers that she's able to hand out. You can also go to discover with a Q, discover.com, for which is where we have the public demo version of our platform that's freely accessible. If you want the ability to see this platform, and also I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has right now.
All right. Thank you, Carl. So I think there's some online questions, so I'm going to hand the mic back to Lena, and she can represent the online questions.
I would just add my technical guru is on holiday in California at the moment, and I was hoping that she was going to be able to dial in, but I'm not sure that she's online. So we'll see how we go with the very technical knowledge graph question.
So Bola Khalil from Leiden University asks, what kind of graph analytics are available in the platform?
Graph analytics, and what would the context be?
I presume it's, kind of, do you support any sort of topology, detection of clicks?
Yeah, I mean,
graph traversal.
We're able to expose the graph through an API. So we do have customers that will use the API to be able to integrate with different applications and analytics they want to build on top of that. But I guess because the graph typically sits in our own user interface, that's kind of where we see the bulk of the analytics taking place.
And then the second question also from him is, given the inclusion of internal data, how do you deal with data security? And is there a way to define different levels of user accessibility dependent on their role?
So security and accessibility?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think from a security standpoint, typically, I think in 95% of the cases that we work on, the DISQOVER platform is an on-prem installation that happens on our customer's side. There is also the ability to restrict, and we work on this with a number of customers that have different indication teams and they don't want to expose certain data to different teams, that there is the ability to restrict and moderate access to certain parts of the DISQOVER platform for different users.
Any other questions? Other questions in the room for Carl?
You may or may not be able to answer this since your tech guru is on holiday. But given that you have a lot of implementations that are on-prem and are incorporating like private proprietary data, how do your customers deal with updating and versioning and being able to maintain and pull in new data across them?
Yeah, so our release cycles in terms of new versioning are roughly sort of every sort of 2 to 3 weeks at the moment. Typically, when we're involved with a customer engagement, it's kind of a meeting of both parties. So we have a solution enablement team that are responsible for doing, I guess, implementation updates. But typically, we'll also see with customers that they'll have their own internal project teams that are responsible for updating the product. Some do that on their own independently. We've seen other customers that have maybe third-party consultancies that are also responsible for doing that work. Hopefully that answers the question.